Good afternoon, and let's start our presentation. So, this will cover leading sustainable change through a merger process, building trust, alignment, and engagement through adaptive leadership and emotional intelligence for Lead 505 and Messiah University, and that's strategic thinking, planning, and organizational change. So, I recently experienced a merger between Share One, that's the company I work for, and Visify, which was a sister company. Two different cores want to merge into one company, DataSphere, which has taken place. The goal, one, merge the companies into DataSphere. The vision, we want to integrate systems, strengthen culture slash climate, and sustain trust throughout their process. And our objectives, present a roadmap for leading successful change post merger. Why was the change necessary and why change leadership matters? Plans do not equal strategy. So, a common flaw in a change management process is that leadership will often create plans and allow those plans to act as the strategy. So, as we see here, plans do not equal a strategy. We have to make sure that the plans support the strategy. So, our overall strategy and vision, as mentioned before, were to merge the companies, cultures, and the cores, and also obtain access into a new customer market. Leadership behavior, that's what drives change and not the policy. So saying if you do not complete these things or adopt new processes, things like you'll be fired or you get written up or any of those type of fear tactics will not work. There has to be a model of the behavior by leadership and support. And misalignment between words and actions weakens commitment. So if we state something in the vision that we intend to happen, but we are not following that up with different actions, different tools, methods, then there cannot be a commitment to the original thing we stated that we want to accomplish. So it is very important that we understand plans don't equal strategy. Leadership has to model their behavior, and we can't have any misalignment between what we say and what we do. The image you're looking at here, it exemplifies what happens when we don't follow the model. We lay out a vision, we don't follow it up with action. So, my iceberg of uncertainty, as you look in the image, you see our organization is the ship. So, just think of a ship in the way it's set up: captains, co captains, staff, different levels of supervisors, different departments, different employees. We have to try to get the organization to act as one unit in order to guide this ship through uncharted water, which is the change process. Now, looking at the iceberg here, you see uncertainty at the top. As an organization, if we do not pay attention to the uncertainty aspect of it, we will get the resulting factors that lie beneath the surface. Now, these are all the things, but these are core or main things that I experienced in my process. So it is pertinent that leaders understand different adaptive leadership styles: authoritative, affiliative, democratic, coaching. They sound self explanatory, they are. However, it won't be one style. There'll be a combination of styles throughout the process that have to be applied. So leadership will understand when and how to use each one of these styles. Authoritative clarifies. Affiliative rebuilds those relationships. We want to boost morale. We want a democratic approach. We want everyone to feel involved in the process. We want to create ownership. So we want to allow for buy-in and inclusion throughout this process. So it can't just be a top-down situation from leadership down to the employee level. We have to think of the pyramid in an opposite way. Instead of leadership at the top, leadership should be at the bottom to serve as the foundation and the support for the entire system to get to the top of the pyramid, which is merging everything and getting our culture changed and making sure we were very inclusive, transparent in the process so everyone is aware of where we're going. In coaching, one-on-one sessions, town hall meetings, team meetings, whatever we need, we want to reinforce the growth as we go through the process. And we want to also support any capability that we're going to need in order to get this process executed. Communication is key in that particular process. And we want to make sure that we have leaders aligned with that process. Want to make sure that leaders are visible, that they are engaging with employees, and that we allow for an open environment of communication without fear. So even if they are negative, so positive and negative feedback is what we're looking for in this particular process. So we want engagement through inclusion, open communication, and again, that's centered around a common theme, but allowing people to come up with different subject matter and topics they would like to cover and concerns they would like to cover. Two-way communication, so between leadership and the rest of the organization, that has to be open. Simple tools, feedback portals, and small group settings, as I mentioned, team meetings or town hall settings. Feedback must be heard, remembered, and acted upon. So if we're just hearing what people are saying, but we're not making any type of intention towards modifying, changing, or including those into our particular process, then it's going to fail. So we want to make sure that we have strong communication, open communication, and leaders aligned with that particular process. We're dropping egos at the door. Now, we must identify who's involved in the process, stakeholder and sponsorship requirements. So here within my circle, you see we have internal stakeholders. So we have to clarify and define roles and expectations. What will you be doing in the new process as we go through the merger, and what do we expect of you? And that includes behaviors, following processes, and being open and forthcoming about concerns or things that you see in the process that may be improved. Sponsors equate to leadership. Anyone who has a capability of providing resources to support that process in order for us to get it done, those will be our sponsors. So leaders reinforce credibility and trust. You are more credible when you are visible, when you are aware, when you are supportive, and you are transparent. And that's what will grow the trust that people are going to need in order to follow this all the way to the end. External stakeholders, so third party vendors that we had to share one. So two examples would be our Amazon warehouse developers that we work with, and also Connective.io, who did a lot of our port connections, a lot of our secure file transfer setups, so forth. You want to engage those people early in the process. One, so they're aware of where we're going, what our vision is. They're in the process, but more importantly is to help co-create solutions to the process. Since this is going to not only affect the organization internally, there'll be external factors. And so we want our partners on board so they can help create those solutions, so we don't put them in a tight spot and we don't lose their interest throughout the process. The change methodology that I selected, open table engagement, I think that's the best for our Share One environment. So open space just means open table approach. To give a little bit more context to that, just think of something like speed dating, where you sit at the table 5 or 10 minutes, you prop up a conversation. So the centralized theme is to meet people, engage with people, and see if there's a common interest there. So by allowing an open table approach, so this is where we will be open with the way we communicate. We will allow for people to express themselves freely, within reason. Of course, we don't want anything flagrant, but we just want people to be open about how they communicate, even if they're having negative thoughts or they're being impacted negatively. That way we can address those. It helps reveal those underlying factors that I showed in the iceberg example. It helps to reveal those things earlier so we can tackle them. We see the iceberg earlier than when we approach upon it. Just think of the Titanic. If we see it earlier, we can navigate differently and we can avoid any type of major losses or any type of major regression process. So in this case, quarterly cross-level reflection sessions, and that should be everyone. Normally it'll just be a leadership reflection, then it'll dictate down to employees. But no, we want to have some type of milestone period that we reflect back on our progress, our successes and our losses. So that way we can modify the process as we go. And then co-create solutions. That's what I was mentioning again with our external partners, but we also want it internally, and we want to document those things in real time. And we want to work with each other to come up with shared outcomes and shared processes in order to move the process forward. So change framework. So let's think about this from an organizational level first. So here, this I basically use from Kotter's 8-step framework. We don't need all 8 in our particular merger situation. Um, and what I mean by that is there are 3 that I think we really need to hone in on. Creating urgency. So we need to create trust through transparency with everyone involved in the process. We want to communicate the vision, constantly communicate adaptive behavior. 2 things. It's not just sending out a mass email. It's not just having a town hall meeting where everyone is there and we just tell everyone what the vision is, or we kind of regurgitate what we went over before. We want to make sure that we're not only communicating via text or through the processes themselves. We want to make sure that behavior is also mirroring and exemplifying what we are trying to achieve. And then we want to sustain progress throughout. Initially, it could start out great. Everyone has energy and desire, or most people do. But as the process goes on and prolongs, there will need to be an reinvigoration of that particular process. So to maintain that momentum, we have to learn where we need to refresh, how to keep this fresh, how to keep people motivated, how to focus on the emotional aspect, the heart, the desire of moving a process along, even when we're a bit uncertain, even when we feel like there may be something that affects us adversely. We still want to sustain this progress, and we want to be inclusive to information being given from most likely the employees. Those are the people that are really going to experience the adversities of a change process. And so we have to keep those people motivated and on board. So from an organizational level, we want to make sure there's urgency, there's open communication, so we can move this process forward. In order for us to do this from an organizational level, we have to be aware that there's an individual component. So no matter what, and this is where I mentioned that we want to focus emotionally versus just policy and procedures. So applying the ADKAR framework, or Hiatt's ADKAR framework, awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, reinforcement, all of those have to be satisfied in the process at each stage of the process. But digging deeper into this particular framework that we're going to use, change drivers. We want to build, reinforce, strengthen, and align for each one of those elements. So when we're creating awareness, that's our vision and what we intend to do and where we want to end in the particular process. We have to do those 4 drivers in each element. Now, it doesn't mean that we're going to follow these elements in a row. Sometimes they'll get a bit out of order. Sometimes we're going to revisit elements, but that's absolutely fine. We want to build awareness and urgency just so we can make sure it aligns with the vision. We want to reinforce desire, and we want to reinforce engagement. And that's what I was mentioning before. Throughout the process, desire can diminish. So we want to come up with ways, or we want to be aware when that starts to diminish, tools that we can implement in order to keep people motivated. And one key thing is through transparent leadership. The more forthcoming with information and truthful you are with employees, the better they're going to follow. Strengthen knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. So in that case, do we have the ability, the knowledge, the capability in order to move forward with merging our processes, working with our external vendors, and where we intend to go at the end of this vision, which is one new company? So we have to figure out throughout the process, do people need additional training? After that training, how do we measure that not only they've received the training, but understand that training, those new processes, in order to have an ability in order to move forward? And if not, we need to come up with ways to reinforce that. Maybe it's not just one main training session for the entire organization. I put the onus on the manager after a town hall situation where we kind of go through some tutorials where management can follow up to make sure that that was understood and make sure employees are aware and they can understand and learn the deficiencies very quickly in order to get people skilled up. So as we guide that ship through the water, we don't have to leave these people behind. They understand where we're going. And we want to align leadership and employee empowerment. Don't want leaders to just come in and say, hey, we're giving you the ability to do this, but there's no support on the back end. There's no visibility. Employees don't even see the higher leadership who's giving the demands that we must build, reinforce, strengthen, and align our processes in order to move forward. We want to make sure that we align that leadership with that empowerment and that they are given the proper empowerment if that's the case to move this forward. And we have trust. So trust not only comes from employees up to leadership, that trust has to be from leadership down to at the even most entry level position at the organization. So, practicality, the ADKAR framework, how do we apply that? Like, what does that mean? Okay, so let's just say we have our first step, awareness, and we say, okay, potential roadblocks that could be limited transparency, not enough information from the top or throughout the process, so it leads to uncertainty. What ways can we tactically approach that in order to make sure that we can move this process forward? Weekly vision briefings, open Q&A. So one of the methodologies I'll discuss or tap back into will be the open table methodology I mentioned earlier, but I have information later in this presentation. But in this case, we want to have different tactical approaches that we can implement and we can work on in real time in order to move the process forward. So I'll pick another one. Let's just say knowledge. Knowledge, what would be a roadblock for that? Minimal training. So we want to have peer mentoring. So people on teams, somebody who's more skilled, who can get another employee or an associate or colleague skilled up, or there's a manager making sure that her or his team are skilled up. Subject matter expert integration. So we bring in these subject matter experts either internally or externally to help. So maybe we bring in a manager of development so they can explain to the installation team that we have a new procedure in order to do our SFTP installs. Maybe we're going to do it cloud-based now instead of server-based. So just different things like that, bringing in people who can help keep the process going, and that can be a coalition, or they can just be making sure that everyone is aware, everyone understands, and if not, we won't leave you behind. We'll provide you with the framework and the tools that we need to move that forward. So we're going to be using the ADKAR framework from an individual level up to the organizational level, and ultimately into our new processes and new company that we're merging into. So the most important factor, the emotional foundation of change. So you have an image of a heart plus the mind. So the heart and the head, and this is Kotter and Cohen. So this is another framework that I know about, that I'm using, that we can apply some of the methods and elements that I think will drive this successfully. So desire, let's focus on it. When I mentioned the ADKAR framework earlier, we had all of the elements. D for desire. Personally, desire is the fuel. And if I want to use another metaphor for that, just think of a car. A car can have all the features on the inside. It can be very comfortable to ride in. It could be a brand new car, which is what this merger is going to be with a new company. All the bells and whistles. If there is no gas in the tank, that car will not move. If there's not enough gas in the tank, it will not move. And we have to understand that as we drive that car, gas would diminish, and we have to come back in and refuel that vehicle in order to keep it moving forward. We refuel it with emotional readiness. So supports change behavior, and emotional ownership sustains change behavior. Visible leadership reinforces that change behavior. So you see, we have the fuel for desire. We have to understand when we need to refuel, and we have to make sure people are emotionally ready with ownership and their leadership is visible, as I mentioned earlier. Leadership, climate, and reinforcement. So, a term I've been using interchangeably is your culture slash climate. Leadership drives engagement in an organization, so they drive the climate. Also, reinforcement through recognition and rewards. Now, that does not just mean, um, hey, here's a $25 gift card because you followed the new process. That reinforcement through recognition also focuses on the awareness. So being aware that during the process, when we come across roadblocks, honestly being able to forecast them, being able to recognize when that happens, and then also having the recognition to know, okay, what tools and what methods can we use. All these things I mentioned previously, plus this establishes credibility on all levels of the organization. But more notably, from our leadership perspective, we need the most credibility there in order to get associates to follow. So that needs to be reinforced, not only through rewards, but just recognition in the process when we need to address it. Leadership must model daily behaviors that mirror the change. So if we say we're going to do this, I also want leadership doing it. Employees will have more buy-in if they do not seem like they're the only ones being asked to do these new procedures, but I'm looking at, my team manager or the director, or I'm looking at leadership and they're not following the model that they said that we were going to. That ties back into the commitment portion of it. In order to have the entire organization committed, leadership must make sure that they are setting the proper climate and that is being reinforced with the proper actions. Metrics and accountability. How will we measure that we are following the process correctly? How will we measure that we are achieving what we say we want to achieve? So, simple metrics, an engagement index. So, that's participation in meetings, participation in events that we have centered around the change process. Employee surveys also serve as that feedback surveys. How do you feel about this? Also, offering open communication within those processes. So, not only having like, do you like it or do you not like it, but you also put in there a space where they can communicate freely and have free responses. So, this is how I feel about our new process A, B, C, D, E. And that someone actually is reading this, someone is actually interpreting this information, the feedback information, positive and negative, and that if we need to implement anything new into the process or we need to modify something that is being acted upon. Then we have retention. So retention of our employees. Mergers are hard. Mergers are difficult. You will have turnover. I have been through 4 acquisitions in the last 20 years. In 0 cases have any of those acquisitions kept 100% of the people involved. So being forthcoming with that information that, hey, we may lose a few players throughout this process. People will be understand. People leave for different reasons. It's not just because they can't adapt to the new environment. Sometimes once the vision is explained and it's understood by certain individuals, it doesn't align with their professional careers. It doesn't align with their personal life. Very understandable. So that's the turnover that is going to happen. But if a process is very unclear, very uncertain, then now we get to another percentage of employees who may not have left the company and just were willing to just go through the process, but they'll leave anyway because it's just so confusing. Same thing with your third party vendors or our external stakeholders. What's the churn rate? So it's not just vendors that help us with the day to day processes, it's also the customer themselves. So, looking at churn rates from credit unions, maybe they are also having difficulties because we had to subtract a couple processes in order to get this new merger or to get our merger to go forward in this new company to be successful. We had to eliminate some things, or we had to add in some additional steps to the process that maybe they just can't align with. So we have to understand to involve those people early, as I mentioned before, so we can come up with a solution together so we can mitigate or minimize our churn rate from our partners and our customers, and we can mitigate any turnover that would not have happened otherwise. Adoption metrics. How do we know people are adopting the new processes? So, okay, who's using the new process? So maybe we have a new application, a new platform that we're doing as far as a ticketing system. So before, you would just get a case, you would just work your case, you would just say, I've completed it, to your manager. But now we have where that has to be reported into a system. And in order to get help with the project, we must submit a ticket to Jira or to Salesforce. And then that way it can be tracked. It can be looked at by multiple eyes, multiple levels of the organization, also your peers. So we want to involve adoption metrics or ways that we can measure that we're following the communication process. So communication reach. When we send out a mass email, how many people open that email? When we send out a webinar and we make it mandatory for people to join, did everyone join? And also some that are non-mandatory, that are optional. Those are the best to me, because you send out an optional reach or optional communication reach like that. Hey, this is an optional meeting to, to add more clarity and to give you more information on our progress and update that we couldn't quite cover in our hour meeting the other day. Okay, let's see how many people take personal daily time to attend an optional meeting. That's another way of measuring the adoption rate. And then leadership climate index. So again, our feedback from our surveys and other comments that we allow the organization to do, different levels of it. And then credibility scores. So what is the credibility score of the CEO versus the director versus the team manager and so forth? And so now we want to establish a methodology to successfully completing this particular process and framework. I'm going to just touch back on some points we went through. I want to see leadership or lead transparency with clarity. We want to be very forthcoming, very open, very clear, and have an urgency to those things, that we get in the information out there to our organization very quickly, very cleanly, very proactively is probably the best word for that. Communicate with open intention. Don't just communicate down the organization. Allow that communication to come back up and allow it to be truthful and allow it to be open and have many channels for that communication. We want to reinforce visibility and recognition. So reinforcing visibility. I want to see leadership exemplify the behaviors of our change process. I want to see managers exemplify. I want to see employees, tenured and entry level. I want to see all levels of the organization exemplifying the behaviors that we have put in place. And I would also like to see our external partners, keeping them involved throughout the process and making sure that's earlier in the process than later. I think we will get that buy-in from our third party vendors and from our customers themselves, and adapt with emotional intelligence. We don't want to policy everything. We don't want to policy out behaviors or policy up behaviors only. Those only serve as guidelines and reinforcement. We want people to be able to naturally adapt, but if they're emotionally in tune to the process and they have a degree of ownership, a degree of openness where there isn't a fear to communicate how you feel or concerned about the process, then it makes it easier to adapt when you know you have that freedom and you have that support from ownership. So in this particular case, it's really simple. We just want to make sure that we are focusing on both the head and the heart of a change process. We will throughout this. I think if we follow these guidelines, these frameworks, and we are constantly aware of the emotional aspect of our project, we will successfully make sure that the merger happens, but being truthful throughout the process. so we don't end up with change fatigue for taking too long or moving too fast. We want to have proper pace management as we go through this particular process. We'll move fast when we need to, we'll slow down when we need to. But even if someone isn't up to speed with the process, we'll have tools and we'll have communication channels in place to get those persons or people up to speed to move along, so everyone on the ship makes it to that final destination of change, which is our merger of DataSphere. Thank you.